Welcome to Brainstoryum. I'm Anna Tizard, and I'll be leading you along the pathway of randomness to a new level of inspiration. Today I'm going to begin with a bit of background about the Surrealists who invented Exquisite Corpse. Then I'll be playing the game to see if I can get any story ideas out of it, and you can even join in if you like. This is Episode 1. Inspiration, the flow of ideas, that spark of wonder as an idea starts to form. As an author, in a lot of ways, I'm just like other authors and artists and creatives from all walks of life, and that we're all looking for inspiration, wondering where our next idea is going to come from. But it's a process we're not really in control of. We all need inspiration to create, but what is it and where does it come from? Now, as an author of dream punk and contemporary fantasy, often exploring ideas about the unconscious mind through my stories, I'm probably a little bit obsessed with these questions because I just love psychology and being creative with psychology. I feel like because you can't absolutely and definitely pin these things down, because the mind itself is an abstract concept, it's not just the brain, we're talking about thoughts and ideas and feelings, the stuff that stories are made of, am I right? That just thinking about these things can give us a way in to a kind of creative thinking. That's really what this podcast is all about. In the early 1900s, Europe was facing some new and terrifying events. There was the First World War, the Russian Revolution, and technological advances of the machine age. All of these things created a feeling of normal life being fractured and everything being at the mercy of these sudden, violent and disturbing changes. A sense of impending doom, perhaps. There was so much that was new and scary and that people weren't in control of. On top of this, Freud had just emerged with his ideas about the unconscious mind and the influences of dreams and so on, and with the translation of his works into various languages, his ideas were fast on the move. More than anything perhaps, the art movement of Surrealism celebrates irrationalism, the notion of these forces at work beneath the surface of civilization. The idea of these irrational forces rising up and the unseen power of the unconscious mind. While some people were trying to avoid all of this and found Freud's ideas quite shocking, talking about dreams and the power of the unconscious and the war, all these ideas were still there and they were changing people's thinking about who they were and how life itself worked. One of the main aims of Surrealism was to try to get at the contents of the unconscious mind and give it direct expression, or as direct as you possibly could. Methods included automatic writing, where writers went into a trance and wrote whatever they came into their heads. This is not to be confused with spiritualism, where people were trying to contact spirits of the dead. That's got the same name though. First of all, it's very hard to do this automatic writing because how do you bypass the workings of your conscious mind? Which is probably the part of your thinking that understands how a sentence works. And how do you stop your critical mind stepping in and working out a way to write a sentence that makes better sense than the one you're automatically writing? How can you even know if you've achieved this letting go of the critical mind? Now, at first glance, it seems to me like a really extreme version of what we might do to a really small extent when we first notice a new idea that pops into our heads. When we first start jotting ideas down, on the one hand, you have this fear that you're going to forget it before you can get it down, or I do anyway. But on the other, you have this feeling that something different, something outside the normal logic of everyday thinking has broken through, and you're trying to clutch this thread of something ethereal. You're listening for something mysterious, and your state of mind feels different from the usual awareness that you have, say if you're listening to a friend talking or watching TV or working. Your awareness feels sort of sharper and more alert in some ways, but there's also a softening where you're trying not to clutch at it too hard. You're trying to set aside normal logic and critical thinking so you can follow this little playful labyrinth that's just appeared in your mind and see where it goes, like following the will-o'-the-wisp into the woods. The Surrealists had taken this to a whole new level, really extreme. I mean, as much as I want to come up with new ideas, I wouldn't expect to put myself into a trance, and I'm certainly not suggesting that anyone tries that. But it shows me that the Surrealists were onto this kind of thinking on a grand and very bizarre scale. So yes, I definitely think there are things we can learn about inspiration by looking at what they did and trying to understand their funny ways. Now, as another example, some of the most famous images that probably pop into your mind when you first think of Surrealism are the paintings that depict scenes from the artist's own dreams. So again, they were trying to express what was in the unconscious mind. But I think with this, the Surrealists had an even bigger problem than they did with automatic writing, or a bigger version of the exact same problem. Because to create a faithful rendition of your dream, you're actually being really conscious about it. You have to really think and remember what you dreamed and use your skill and techniques as a painter. And of course, it takes much longer to paint a picture than it does to jot down a paragraph or two that might or might not be from your unconscious mind. I mean, how are you supposed to know? For this reason, though, the dream paintings were criticised at the time, even by the founders of Surrealism, such as André Breton. So how else did the Surrealists try to get to these irrational forces that might give them some insight into what lies beneath, the truth that lies beneath normal life? Enter randomness and the element of chance. One of the things that really characterised Surrealist art and literature was the collision of images or ideas that didn't fit together naturally, but when you put them side by side, they seemed to suggest a whole new meaning, a kind of resonance of another truth, even if the effect on the audience was to jolt us or shock us out of our ordinary ways of thinking. Some artists used the element of chance by dropping pieces of paper or threads onto their canvases or whatever it was they were making, and then using where those things landed to direct what they did next. So where they next painted different parts of the picture. There was this anarchic sense of some other power being at work here, perhaps just the power of nature, or an irrational set of physical laws. The idea was just to let things happen without the interference of critical human thought and conscious striving. Again, a bit like an extreme version of what we might do when we're listening for a new creative idea. And along came Exquisite Corpse, the ultimate game of randomness. It was originally based on the parlour game of consequences, where each player writes part of a story, folds their piece of paper over to hide what they've written from the next person, and then passes it on for the next person to write the next part. And so you end up with this really weird story made up of random parts. Well, in 1925, the Surrealists boiled this down to a single sentence. To ensure it made grammatical sense, they chose this structure. The described noun did something to, with, or for the described noun. Now, the first game result, or we're led to believe, was, translated from the French by the way, the exquisite corpse shall drink the new wine. And that's where the game gets its name. The art version which seems so much more famous and always comes up loads more if you do an internet search for Exquisite Corpse, is where different players draw or paint different sections of a body to make a very strange jumbled creature. And that came soon afterwards and became presumably a lot more popular, which is why it's so much better known than the word game. So let me just give you a couple of examples before we play the game. Now, if you're subscribed to my Deeply Weird newsletter or have read anything, well, almost anything I've written lately, you'll know about my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, where each standalone story or novel is based on the results of a game. The Empty Danger, which is book 1, was a weird word combination that cropped up in one of the first games I ever played. And this is the beauty of the game, in that you don't have to use the whole sentence. Quite often you can't, it's just too bizarre. And it's very hit and miss, as you're about to find out. But sometimes these describing word noun combinations can be enough on their own to spark a story. So having asked myself the question, what on earth is an empty danger? I wrote a novel about fear at the beginning of the first lockdown in 2020, about lockdown in 2020, but with a whole fantastical interpretation of what fear is and how we might deal with it. Because what else could be empty and dangerous at the same time? Book 2 in my series, Eye for Immortality, was based on a whole Exquisite Corpse result, which was: the lofty portrait of my grandmother rapidly salivated at the estranged stairwell. Okay, there's a lot going on in there, so I'm just going to say that again. The lofty portrait of my grandmother rapidly salivated at the estranged stairwell. Now, I did cheat slightly. I used staircase instead of stairwell, but I'm sure you'll forgive me. Bit of creative license there. So what I got from this idea was this reclusive artist called Flo living with her grandmother, who's also an obsessive artist, and whose portrait seems to come alive. It was this idea of a drooling portrait. It almost became horror, but I cannot and will not do horror. I don't like to follow through with that feeling of dread that you get in horror that just permeates everything. I'll go a little away with it, and then I want to feel something else. I want the reader to feel other things. So it gets a little bit close towards horror, but then it takes a sharp left turn into something even weirder than you start out with. And I cannot tell you any more. You're just going to have to read it if you want to know. Anyway, playing Exquisite Corpse in person is absolutely hilarious. The answers are ridiculous, and that can be pretty funny. But once you start to really look at the sentences and try and make sense of them, or use them to sort of come up with a story idea, they're often quite creepy because of these strange word combinations. So now I think it's time to give it a go. Let us follow the path of randomness to new heights of inspiration. Now, in order to play, I've collected words and phrases submitted by lovely people on the internet using my Play Exquisite Corpse page at annatizard.com. So they're all written out on little slips of paper, folded up, and they've been sorted into 3 socks of destiny. That's right, I have 3 socks. Clean, of course, this is a clean show. Totally mismatched, obviously. We've got to be surrealist about this in every way we can, within reason. So let me see, my describing word sock is pink with white polka dots. My noun sock is grey with white polka dots and pink heel and toe. And my action sock is larger than the others. It's polka dots. It's dark blue with pale polka dots and dark pink polka dots. So I just want to point out now, I'm not obsessed with polka dots. My mum sent me these spare socks. The less you know, probably the better. She's also not obsessed with polka dots. It's just the way it's happened, okay? It's just the way it's happened. I thought it was cool that they all they're mismatched and yet they have a theme. So they are filled with different scraps, or not scraps, little slips of paper folded up from submissions through my website. Now, all I have to do is pull out some entries in the right order and see what weird word combinations come up. Now, if you'd like to turn this into an imagination exercise for yourself, then grab a piece of paper and a pen or pencil, and once I've drawn the words for the first sentence, I might do more than one, I don't know. This is the first episode, anything could happen. But you could pause this podcast and take 5 minutes or however long you'd like and do your own brainstorm. Then you can press play when you're done and find out how well or badly I've done. Or just listen, either way. Okay, word 1, sock 1. Here goes. Feels a little bit like Christmas on a tiny scale. Right, the first word sent by Aurora is beautiful. Let's have a look in the nouns. Second word sent by Eric Henderson of @MagExcuse. That's his Twitter name. Concierge, the beautiful concierge. Let's give this an action. Again, this is from Aurora, doing very well today. Wrote a love letter to. Back to describing word. Pull this out. From Andy Burrows. Is one of the very first people I played Exquisite Corpse with in the original gang. So that's amazing. The word is elevated. And finally, the last word, which is again a noun. Oh, again, it's Eric Henderson. I've been very good at jumping these up. Eucalyptus tree. Ooh. So we have the beautiful concierge wrote a love letter to the elevated eucalyptus tree. What is going on here? Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to pour some green tea. I've had some green tea brewing here on the side, so I can have a little think. Go. It's very good for the concentration. Sorry I can't offer you any. That's a bit of a shame. Let's have a think about this. I like the idea of an elevated tree. Because trees being very, well, literally rooted in the ground. The idea of a floating tree is quite interesting to me. I'm very surrealist, I realise. But looking at the whole sentence, because it's a concierge, so let's say this is a small hotel, or maybe a big hotel. There'll be an elevator if it's a big hotel. So the beautiful concierge wrote a love letter to the elevated eucalyptus tree. So I'm going to use a little bit of creative license, post-it license here. Let's say the eucalyptus tree is elevated because it is in the elevator. And the beautiful concierge didn't necessarily write a love letter to the tree, but she wrote to someone she's in love with who is staying on the 6th floor of the hotel, and perhaps she's kept it anonymous letter, just to test the waters, because obviously it's kind of inappropriate. It's at work, it's a client. Yeah, don't go there in reality. But yeah, so there's someone in the elevator with this eucalyptus tree. Perhaps they've got confused about what floor they're on. They really need to put it on the ground floor where it'll add something. You know, it's a potted tree, by the way. It'll add something to the decor of the place, the ambience. And the beautiful concierge gets on the elevator just as this other person with the tree is getting off, and she's got her love letter perhaps in her pocket, but it gets snagged on the branches of this tree. So, and she doesn't realise. So she's getting on, getting off. She goes all the way up to the 6th floor. Did I say the 6th floor? I don't know. I'm not the one in love here. So the person coming out of the elevator, there's this letter that's attached to the tree, and perhaps he'll notice it, or maybe someone later on might notice it. If this is around Christmas time, maybe someone will find it thinking, oh, this is a new cute little local tradition to do, is leave letters rather than gifts on a non-Christmassy tree that happens to be in the foyer of this hotel. So yeah, there's the basis. You can imagine. We don't yet know who these characters are. Who is she in love with? What's the person like? The person who's bringing this eucalyptus tree in. Is there some kind of mistaken identity thing going on here? You could do a silly sort of romance mix-up story here. There's something there. Do you know what? That's not bad for a first go, if I may say so. Okay, first time doing this on the air. Right, do you know what? I'm going to do another one. It is feeling like Christmas. I'm going to have another one. Let me go right to the bottom of the sock of describing word. Get something new. Okay, this is sent by, well, it's either pronounced Louis or Lewis. I'm going to say Lewis D. Natty is the first word. Not like these socks. These socks are brand new, I'll tell you. So let's get the noun. It's getting caught on my fingers. They're all trying to climb out. This is sent by Aurora again. Siren. The natty siren. There's two words you wouldn't expect to see together. Right, let's pull out an action. Okay, this is a Twitter ID. PDRome prompt, or PD-Rome prompt. The action is broke a handful of dried spaghetti in half for. Bit of a cookery scene going on here. This natty siren is cooking for someone. So another describing word. Come on, it's getting stuck on my fingers. This is sent by Mariah. Green. Okay. And final noun. Find out what was green. It's just, sometimes it just gets stuck. Oh dear, I need some bigger socks here. Oh, this is PD-Rome prompt again, and it's three-tailed rat. I have some difficulty with this one. So the natty siren broke a handful of dried spaghetti in half for the green three-tailed rat. I'm instantly thinking of Ratatouille. great animation movie. But this time, a natty siren is cooking for them. Interesting though, because not only is the rat three-tailed, but it's green. I'm guessing this siren is not a good cook. Something terrifying has happened to this recipe. Perhaps it's her previous cooking that she's done, because at this point she's only breaking a handful of dried spaghetti in half for this poor, malfunctioning, malformed creature that is green. Unless, well, she's a siren, so perhaps she didn't cause this. I think maybe I'm jumping, excuse me, I'm jumping to conclusions here because she's natty, and because of the state of this rat, I've jumped to conclusions that she's done some damage here. When in reality, well, so I use that word very loosely. Looking at the story as it would appear to us in the sentence, in the order of events, let's face it, the rat is already three-tailed and the colour green. So let's just give the siren the benefit of the doubt. The rat's already in a bit of a state, okay? And the siren is trying to make it better with some home cooking. And at this point, it's quite basic. She's breaking a handful of dried spaghetti in half. So she's right at the beginning of this spaghetti meal. And despite the fact that she's natty, so she's not in great shape herself, she's a bit, natty around the edges, a bit rough, she's helping out this creature. Perhaps this is something that she does. She's the type of siren that helps out mythical creatures or ordinary creatures who are perhaps between staying ordinary and becoming mythical or monstrous, and she tries to help them. This is perhaps something that she does in her spare time. Or she's not doing her normal siren duties, whatever that is. So yeah, already I quite like this. Is a very kind story. It does feel a bit like children's fiction, but you know what? It wouldn't have to be, because you could work out the horrors that have occurred to this rat before they came across this extremely charitable, generous siren who cooks magical meals to make sick creatures better. Hopefully. We don't know how that's going to go, do we? The action part gives us, she's in the midst of cooking something. It could go horribly wrong. She's trying to make the rat better, dissolve two of its dodgy tails, and bring it back to a natural shade of brown or grey or whatever it is. So, who knows? It really depends how you are to write it. So these are just springboards for something else, and it's the same as anything. Say if you wrote a story based on either of these exquisite corpses, if 20 people, if 1,000 people wrote stories based on these exquisite corpses, I know they would all be completely unique. They'd have a different tone, different atmosphere. There's so many different options at each stage, yet we do have the beginnings of 2 stories here, which is great. This just went really, really well. So I hope this has been inspiring to you one way or another, and I want to say thank you for listening to the very first episode of Brainstorium. If you do write a story from any of this or have any ideas, perhaps drop me a line and let me know, and perhaps we'll tweet about them or something. Please, if you enjoy the podcast, subscribe, comment, tell other people about it so they can discover it too. And also, if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to my free newsletter at annatizard.com, because you'll get the free ebook of The Empty Danger, as well as a totally exclusive short story. I've deliberately not published it so that it's just for subscribers. Okay, so Take care. Go forth and be inspired.